Every morning before the world properly starts, I sit down and I handwrite 3 pages, three A5 pages, the small ones. No polishing, no restarting, no trying to sound intelligent halfway through. Just 3 pages, front to back, every single day. And then the next morning, I read those pages out loud to myself, just to really see how it sounds and to see if I was kind of, on the money as far as, my thinking was concerned at the time. Now, some days I have to say that the writing really works. I'm in a certain mood, a certain frame of mind, and everything just clicks. And some days it doesn't. So, but that's part of the point, because if you wait until you're good before you let yourself begin, you usually never begin at all. That nagging voice in your head sort of wants you to stop before you've got going. But in my experience, every sentence starts sounding wrong the second it hits the page. And it's your job as a writer to get better so that it starts sounding right and it starts getting as close to the essence of what it is you want to say as possible. And that's really the skill, which is taking what you perceive in your head in a certain way and bringing it to life on the page in such a way that it communicates what is inside of you and what you actually wanted to say. I mean, have you ever tried to tell somebody something? You knew exactly what you wanted to say, but it came out all wrong. And then you have this situation where there's like misunderstanding and it causes problems. Language causes problems. There's no doubt about that. So this is about getting closer to saying exactly what you want to say to avoid those problems of communication. And I believe that if you write 3 pages a day, every single day, that will naturally start to happen. And then that will naturally start to filter through into your everyday life. So, maybe you realize that you're spending too much time inside other people's thoughts, i.e. reading, which is essential, by the way, to becoming a good writer, is reading, but you're not spending enough time working, through your own. So basically what I mean by that is you're a consumer. You're consuming other people's thoughts, other people's ideas, rather than creating and generating your own thoughts. And I think that there is a healthy balance between being a creator and a consumer. We're all consumers, but I think a lot of people will consume relentlessly, and I think it exhausts them because they're just absorbing all of this information and getting these endorphin rushes and these little moments of pleasure, but cumulatively they just end up leaving you feeling stale and empty. Whereas when you start taking what you consume and using it to create your own writing, you really sort of, I think inside you start to feel better, you start to feel happier. I think creation generally does give you a sense of sort of self-worth, and I wouldn't say it's a dopamine hit. It's more like a kind of, a low level infusion of dopamine rather than a big spike of dopamine. So this process of the 3 pages a day is my attempt to quietly dismantle that procrastinator in me. And, I'll do that one morning at a time. I know that I don't really need to procrastinate on 3 pages because I know it's going to be over quickly. It's like, ripping off the plaster. I'm not setting myself up for failure by saying, hey, I'm going to write a novel today and getting 1 page into it and then abandoning the project. This is 3 pages a day. That over 365 days will be, about 365,000 words. So very quickly, this is the one I'm working on at the moment. I've got loads of these books, but I'm writing these at the moment. This is this little pad that I've got. I'm not that fond of it really because I think if you have a nice pad, it does actually help you to, it's like having a clean house. You go in and it's nice and, it feels better than having like a little scruffy house. And this same with this little scruffy pad. And, I do treat it with respect, and I'm filling those 3 pages up every day, but I definitely prefer it if I've got a nice, like, moleskin book like this one here, this is different though. I just got scrappy notes in here. This isn't my 3 pages a day. I got them mixed up. I should have done it the other way around. But anyway, they have to be A5, not bigger as far as I'm concerned, because when you get 3 pages of A4, it does become a bigger task, and it becomes more of an insurmountable task, I think, especially if you're not used to sitting down and writing a lot. So I think, just stick with A5 booklets and stick to the lines. You'll come up with about 700 words. Sometimes I do write 2 lines to a line, which gives me 1,400 words, but I really don't think you need to do that. Basically, just stick to the lines. I think the last ones that I've written here, I really did stick to the lines there. And I think that's the best way to go. That's what you need to do. So what I then do, I don't type the first draft. I don't use AI to generate any of the writing myself either. You can if you want to. I can't stop you. But I think that the difficult part is usually where the growth lives. So if you're, going to use AI, then good luck to you. But there won't be any growth in that, because what you're doing is you're basically delegating your intelligence to a computer, and you're asking it to compile words for you that don't come from within you. They come from within a system that is based on probabilistic outcomes, drawing from what's available on the internet, and cobbling it together so that it sounds human, but it isn't human. And I think the really important part about doing 3 pages a day is that it's coming from you, and it's a human first process. So use AI, but don't use it when you're doing this 3 pages. Just be at peace, take your pen and write it down. Because really the point here isn't perfection. The point is consistency. And with consistency, you will improve over time. It's like anything, like any sport. You're not going to go down to the driving range and become a great golfer in one session with the teacher, but with a coach. But you will become better over time if you stick to this and do it every single day, and listen to the coaching that you get. So consistency is number 1, not perfection. Consistency first. Perfection is out the window. I don't believe in perfection. Don't believe it exists. It definitely doesn't exist in writing, because language is an imperfect form of communication. But through doing this, you will get better at communicating using your written language, which will naturally then flow and translate into your spoken word. If you're constantly stopping to judge the work, I think this is the point here. You'll never build the momentum. So there's a phrase that I love that Stephen King uses. He says, write faster than the gingerbread man can run. And he talks about writing just fast enough that niggling voice of self-doubt doesn't catch up with you and grab you and pull you back. So you need to write fast enough so that you can get the thoughts down, and fast enough so that the voice of self-doubt doesn't apprehend you. And you need to write slow enough so that it isn't just a whole bunch of stream of consciousness gobbledygook, and it actually makes sense. So finding your natural pace is really important in this process. And when you find it, it's actually a joyous feeling. That your thoughts are coming out, they're going down, they're making sense. You know what you're trying to say. You're not writing just for writing's sake, and you're not letting those negative thoughts creep in and hold you and pull you back from doing what you need to do. And just to be clear, as I mentioned, this is not a stream of consciousness rambling. Some people say, wake up and just write anything that comes into your head. Yes and no. Write what comes into your head, but try and structure it in such a way that, if somebody else were to read it, they'd be like, yeah, I can see what this point this person's trying to make. You don't want to just fill your notebook with noise. You want it to be something that you can look back on and say, I remember that, So 3 pages gives you enough space to find a beginning, a middle, and an end. So your first page is your beginning. That's when your thoughts really start to get going. You might actually find that, which I often find, is that your writing gets better as you write, and your flow gets better. When you read it back, the first paragraph is like, oh, it's a bit clunky, but then you can actually see visually where you start to find your voice and start moving into the kind of the gist of what it is that you're trying to say. So this whole process takes me somewhere between half an hour and an hour. Really, this is about showing up. Woody Allen said 80% of success is showing up, and I think that's true of this process as well. So you're showing up to the page. That's your 80% done. That's your that's your success. You know, if you're not in front of that page, you're not going to get anything down. So the 20%, and that's a good way to think about it. It's just that little 20%, which is the effort you then put into writing for those 3 pages. So every writer will have a routine where, you know, they come to the page and they sit down and they force themselves to write. And this is your system now. You can own it. You can sit down every single day and you can go, right, I'm a writer and I'm going to write my 3 pages. And when you're done, you can give yourself a pat on the back and, you know, say jobs are good. I'm not saying this is the only way to go about doing things. I'm not saying this is the only way to become a writer, but it is one way and one reliable way to get good at writing.